today, so I know where those three are. So do I have to move those? No. Okay. So righto, Port Hills response and recovery. Welcome, John. How are things going on a nice damp day? Won't be hot up there today, so please fill us in.
Well, over the next 45 minutes or so, we should be able to provide you with exactly that information. Thank you very much all, and a warm welcome to everyone who's taken the time out of their busy schedules to give us an update. So the purpose of this morning's session is to update the Council on the response to and recovery from the 2024 Port Hills fires. The main reason for this slide is to reinforce that there's no one organisation presenting here today. This is a collaboration of a number of agencies under the following headings, and to a large extent, the success and the progress made is as a result of everyone collaborating and working together. We've got a number of presenters this morning, and rather than going through them all now, I'll introduce them as they come up and talk to the various slides. So to kick off, I'd just like to introduce Dave Stackhouse, District Commander for Fens in Canterbury, who'll start with the fire and the response too.
Good morning.
Right.
I guess the first slide is an overview, and I'll just, as I go through a few slides, I'll just paint the picture of the fire that we were presented with, the ongoing operation, and how we tackled it, and then delve into some of the community engagement and recovery thinking that went on during the fire operation over the extended period. As you know, the incident came in via multiple 111 calls at 2:12 in the afternoon. It was fair to say that the weather conditions were reasonably benign at the start of the fire, but the fire ignition point in the area was well supported by the fuel loading that was at the point of origin. As you see, the fire started to grow there. We'll just run through a few slides showing you the progression as we were responding to it. So if we move to 1500, which is the next one, you can see that you're starting to get good fire build up by the colour of the smoke and the generating combustion of the fuel loading. If we move into the 1523, which is a shot taken from the Hoonhay Valley, Welsh Place, Hallswell. You can see there we're starting to get really good fire momentum and progressing towards the structures along that ridge line. At that stage, there was quite a lot of pre-mobilising occurring. Prior to the Port Hills fire, we'd had significant fire activity in North Canterbury. So the mantra was to ensure that we had all fires that were hit with a significant response and what we called an enhanced response, which was both from ground resources and air. So you see the shot here is from Living Springs. It was approximately 100 people at Living Springs, and early on we received some inquiries from them. They were quite concerned. There was a lot of school children there. So we did an early preliminary evacuation just to assist with their peace of mind. This slide was taken at 1611, and it's important if you look at the circle that's showing you on that slide there, is an independent fire to the actual what we call the main fire run, which was heading towards Hoonhay and Kennedy's Bush. That is a spot fire, and what we get there with the type of fuel that fire was consuming puts a lot of aerial firebrands in the air, firebrands being hot embers, and of course they're fanned by the wind and therefore create a lot of spot fires ahead of the main fire and off to the flank of the fire. And this fire, why I've shown it to you, is quite significant because this actually generated the fire run up towards the Summit properties on Summit Road and Marley's Hill. Next slide. So next one's at 1620. You can see the fire progressing quite well. It's a pretty significant fire to the Christchurch public, very visual, and obviously brought back a lot of memories of the fire in 2017. This slide here shows you by the colour of the smoke here, it's hit the bigger fuels around the area there of the substanding scrub and broom layers and the pine trees. And you can see the difference in the generation of heat and smoke coming up from that fire there. That was taken from the Justice Precinct. Then we move on to 1714. At this stage, we've got quite a good response on the ground and quite a good aerial response in play. Again, just take you through those quickly. Again, 2029 is the next slide. Yep, and you're getting an indication of. I really want to move on to this one here, which is the night, which is the prevalence of the learnings from the AFAC report in 2017 around how we could respond better in our night operations. And as I said, our mantra during the evening prior to the actual night shift coming on was to actually continue the suppression with significant resourcing. And at the height of the fire, I had about 130 firefighters and 15 helicopters and 2 fixed wings. The fixed wings were brought in the next day. We did have them on standby and ready at Christchurch Airport, but we decided that the priority would be retardant drops the next day on some of the flanks to try and help us there. But significant work went on during the night, which is something that we've been training for and preparing for and doing. As I said, the fires in North Canterbury given us an example of how we had mastered that art, if you like. And the idea was to bring in heavy machinery and cut in and secure the Worsley road flank and try and put a break in through to Dyers Pass Road from Worsley Spur, which effectively anchored that off and protected the Christchurch Adventure Park as best we could. That was completed by early morning, and there was some really good work completed by the staff overnight. The significant threat and burning up through the summit area where those properties were, and unfortunately in the aerial reconnaissance that I did late afternoon, we misidentified a structure which looks like containers or sheds to us, and I prioritised firefighting assets around the known houses, and it turned out to be a container house. So that is the one that we lost. That's the only structure that was lost. If we go to the next slide, this is a good slide. It shows you the fire break that I just mentioned earlier and the night operations. Obviously, operating night brings significant risk, and it's something that required us to have quite a significant safety plan in play. There's quite a lot of hazards at present, obviously, with heavy machinery and firefighters operating with limited visibility in that terrain. The slide on the right there shows you the backing fire that we ended up having and suppressing that night, and you see that the fire behaviour is quite benign as it came down and tracked into that fire break. I guess just quickly, the main break was about 1.4 kilometres in length, and the Worsley to Hoon Hay Valley, we put a 900 metre break in. This fire is what Christchurch public would have viewed on the morning of the 15th. And there was still obviously a lot of work to do and a lot of concern from residents. The main efforts for fire suppression was to carry on the aerial attack supported by ground forces and heavy machinery, and also start to make sure the fire retardant lines were in play, which is ammonia sulfate basically, which restricts the fuel and starves the fuel from the fire basically. So it's quite a good method of attack and quite cost effective for us using fixed wings as opposed to helicopters. If we move into the next slide, which looks at the Christchurch City Council Atensis system, I just wanted to talk about this with you briefly because it's, and I think we've got a video there. It's a really a great initiative that's been employed by Christchurch City Council and Selwyn District Council. It provides excellent on-site and real-time intelligence to us, amongst other things. So it's a particularly good tool for us as firefighters, and also provides good, accurate weather readings on particular sites there. So I guess I think we've got someone in the audience here who can talk about the Altensor system if you want any questions on that. This is actually 2 shots, I think, from GIS mapping from council, which just shows a sort of an oblique view of the fire.
Just a wee break from Dave. Keegan Huckleberry from our Civil Defence team will just talk to some of the environmental impacts. Keegan.
Kia ora everyone. As covered in some of Dave's earlier slides, the fire perimeter was 24 kilometres and covered about 650 hectares. About 28 of those hectares was council reserve area. Of this council reserve area, about 12.6 hectares had a mix of native plantings and natural regeneration. As Dave previously said, there's about 2 kilometres just shy of fire retardant lines and about 5 kilometres of fire breaks up in that area. Point to note is that those fire breaks will contribute to soil erosion and water runoff, and I believe there's a photo later that shows some of the impacts of that. Some further impacts, so grazing land for stock along the Port Hills was significantly impacted, as well as the Christchurch Adventure Park having to close. Unfortunately, the Attentis video didn't play, but it showed a really good shot of the Christchurch Adventure Park and how close the fire got to a lot of the structures there. We can circulate that Attentis video later if anyone is interested.
Cool. Our head ranger for the Port Hills, Paul Devlin, is in the audience. So if councillors have got any questions on other aspects of the environmental damage, the Paul's available to answer those at the end. Returning to you, Dave.
Thank you. I'm just going on the theme of the technology that we used at this fire to assist us in our operations. The 2 main ones are Fire Mapper, which is a tool we now use so we can get up in the helicopter and accurately map the fire quickly, which is then passed on to our sector commanders and our incident control team and incident management team, which provides real-time mapping of the incident. It's also really useful as we suppress the main fire because we can use it at night with our drones to establish hotspots. Hotspots have a habit of reigniting and causing us concern. You can see there as an example of one of them. And you can see when I put the tick camera on this, you can see the cracking of the orange ash there underneath. That's 450 degrees centigrade, and it is down to a depth of 700 millimetres. So some of these require pretty extensive digging out and nullifying and wetting them out. So that can involve heavy machinery and a lot of hard work for the firefighters dragging hoses through that environment to find them. So the technology speeds that up, and I guess that's enabled us to enable people to return to their properties a lot earlier than we probably could in the past. And I'll make one comment about that. That was one of our mantras right from the start, learnings from the last fire, that we wanted to manage the risk but ensure that we could get people back in and messaged into their properties as soon as that was possible. So that's just looking at the Altensor system again. So I think across the Adventure Park area at the time there were 5 sensors operating, and I'd just like to say that we had a couple of temporary systems in play as well that were very useful. And post-fire, we appreciated the deployment of the portable towers across the Port Hills for the SAIL GP, which also provided real-time intelligence for that. So again, I can't stress how useful they are. We've also got systems at the Bottle Lake Forest as well. Next slide, thanks. I'll probably briefly touch on the media and public information. As I said, that was pretty important to us. The last fire, there were a lot of learnings about communicating with the public, ensuring the messaging was correct. People see their houses endangered on TV. They want to know what's happening. So I put a lot of emphasis on our team being able to provide that information. And I also like to congratulate the Civil Defence team once the early declaration was made, and the mayors for making that. It was quite good rapport and messaging through the combined media conferences. So that actually made our job at the front face a lot easier, so thank you for that. There's an example of the 2 EMAs that went out, one from Foreign Emergency and one later from Civil Defence. I guess that there's only so many characters you can put in an EMA, so it's important to get the messaging as accurate as possible, so that the public are well informed and can do the right thing and evacuate the areas of risk.
I'd like to just pass on to Keegan again to talk about some of the aspects of public information management.
Yeah, as Dave said, the public information management in this response was excellent. It was a joined-up approach across FENZ, Christchurch City Council, Sound District Council, and Canterbury Regional Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. Everyone was saying the same stuff, delivering the correct messages to the people that needed it, and having that kind of single source of truth was a celebrated success. There were multiple community meetings held at Te Hapua for affected residents. There was a joined up effort again between FENZ and Civil Defence. There were regular media stand-ups by the Mayor, the Controller, Sound District Council Mayor, FENZ and Police, which is exceptional. Thanks to the Mayor for delivering those key messages to the public. It's really appreciated. There were lots of social media posts, Facebook being the primary, and as I said before, the joined up response, it was largely reposting each other's, by each other's being the agencies involved in the response, social media posts, as well as sharing Newsline blog updates. You can see at the top there that the rolling Newsline was used as a rolling blog with more than 20 updates. And there was also letterbox drops for affected residents that was done by the Christchurch City Council New Zealand response teams, as well as Sound response teams, which we'll touch on later, just giving them as much up-to-date information targeted at those affected residents.
Can you swap that with Sarah?
Absolutely. I'm being asked to leave, so.
I'd just like to introduce Sarah Connell, who'll talk about some of the actions, resources and our wonderful volunteers. Incidentally, if councillors have any question about the Attentus fire warning system, we've got Michael Healy in the gallery here who can give more information, and the extra systems we've since invested in. Sarah.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. So I just wanted to start off by saying that there really was an overwhelming willingness by the wider council staff to support this response. The CDM team is quite small, and it is really critical for us to be able to pull on additional staff that are trained and committed to helping. So kudos to them. Regarding the CCC staff and EOC response, at around 3 p.m, CDM staff moved into the Emergency Operations Centre at Justice, started what's generally referred to as a warm start. So we knew that there was the potential for the event to escalate, so we started to focus on enhancing our situational awareness, gauging availability from wider council staff to come in and help us, and thinking about what our key priorities were likely to be. A key welfare task was around establishing that Civil Defence Centre Te Hapua, and the intention of this was to create a safe space for impacted residents or concerned people to come in and access information. And I'll talk to the accommodation effort in a later slide. 15 park rangers were tasked with providing, again, that situational awareness across the Port Hills area, and also with the direct involvement to the firefighting effort as well. Cordon management was led by police but supported both in planning and implementation from within the EOC. We also brought in roading contractors and members of our transport staff here at Council, again so that we could have real-time information around where crews are at and what support might be required at cordons. Similarly, traffic management was a key function for us, understanding what roads were closed, the impact on traffic, and ensuring that other functions of the EOC had that information as well. We had 5 of our team from the animal management team who were in direct contact with MPI, and their role was talking to MPI and ensuring that there was provision for animal care and shelter if it were to be required. So what that meant in terms of people resourcing, we pulled in 4 additional emergency management staff from our neighbouring TAs throughout the response to support us. There were also 5 EOC liaison roles established. So these are staff from partner agencies directly within the EOC as a conduit for information and discussion. What else did we do? There was in total 68 council staff involved into the response, and there's a wee breakdown on the slide there for you, which totaled totaled 766 council staff hours. 877 volunteer hours were also used throughout this response, and I'd be really keen to talk to that now. Cool. So in total, 54 volunteers worked across various locations throughout the response, and those volunteers came from a number of teams from both Christchurch and Selwyn Council. I'd really like to take this opportunity to wholeheartedly thank those volunteers. Put simply, without them, we would not have had the response that we had. So their commitment really cannot be understated. The CDC at Te Hapa was stood up within a couple of hours of the fire starting, and again, that wouldn't have happened without our volunteers. So they left work early. They rearranged commitments such as childcare. Some of them gave up on their Valentine's evening. They were, in short, fantastic. They staffed cordons, they provided public reassurance, and I'm just going to do a little plug there. The stripy red road cone looking dude is actually a council staff member who is in one of the volunteer teams. He gave up his weekend to work on the Saturday and Sunday and then came into work on the Monday. And most, if not all, of the volunteers that committed their time to this response would have been in exactly the same situation. Cool. Next slide, please, John. So as it should be, welfare and looking after those people that were impacted by the fire was at the forefront of the response. For a lot of people, including the wider Port Hills community, this was the second time in 6 years that their homes, livelihoods, or both had been threatened. So we're really conscious of the impact that this can have, and one of the actions of the response was to contact our partners at Te Whatu Ora to provide psychosocial support and presence for affected communities. Approximately 80 households were in the evacuated area. Most people, thankfully, were able to stay with friends and family. However, 4 people did require accommodation as a result of those evacuations. A local hotelier actually came into the CDC at Te Hapa to offer accommodation. And I think this is a really good example of the value of having presence at a local level when we can, resource committing, because it meant that people's needs were identified and resolved directly through that local civil defence centre. As we've heard, unfortunately, one dwelling was destroyed. FENS worked in conjunction with the welfare desk and the welfare manager within the EOC to make and maintain contact and offer support and assistance where able. Throughout the response manager was in contact with Ngātahu. An archaeological survey of the impacted area was made and an assessment on mana whenua and the impacts on whenua as well. I don't think he's in the room, unfortunately, but thanks to Paul Dahl, who was engaged through Ngāti Wheti to conduct an environmental survey on the area as well. Cool.
Thanks, Sarah. I'd like to invite Keegan back up to the table again to talk about some lessons learned.
Thank you. Kia ora, I'm back again. Fortunately, we have lessons that we can learn from a previous event in 2017. There were about 7 major lessons learned in total from the 2017 Port Hills fires that, if the scenario happened again, we should look to implement. Of those 7, we can say that we wholeheartedly accomplished 6 of them and partially completed the 7th. So as we have up there, the prompt declaration by both mayors, Mayor Major and Sound District Council Mayor, enabled the controller to receive the powers they needed to support the FENS response. We held those public meetings to share information face-to-face to the affected community, which received overwhelmingly positive responses from the community. The up-to-date information that was provided to those on the cordons and at the civil defence centres really assisted. We can always do better in that space, freeing up those lines of communication to particularly the cordon points, so they're giving the most up-to-date information, but it was a significant improvement. And then forward planning of all operations to remove the risk of inconsistent messaging. So in the EOC, there was a concerted effort to get the members of the PIM and the EOC planning team together at regular intervals to forecast what was going to be said and how those plans would interact. Next slide, please, John. So social media was absolutely embraced, and big shout out to Katie and the PIM team for smashing that. It was one less thing that the EOC leadership had to worry about because they did such a good job. And then the Christchurch EOC volunteers, so that's our staff that come in and support us in the EOC, have been receiving regular training, both in their functions in general EOC conduct, but in emergency management procedures as well. And that really showed. There's still a lot more training that needs to be done for council staff in this space, but the level of knowledge they had was a great foundation to then launch from, and the willingness and keenness from all staff that came in was incredibly admirable and made the whole response a lot easier. And then that last one there is our only partial one, and that's setting up the affected residents register as soon as possible and prioritising communications with them. So it's only partially completed because it was not done as soon as the kind of event began and the EOC started to be stood up. And because of the risks to life and property, the affected residents were evacuated via the EMA prior to us being able to have any other place for them to go to set up that affected residents register. However, subsequently at that civil defence centre, that was the place to receive information for those affected residents, and we tried to establish an affected residents register there, and then going through subsequently into recovery, there's an affected residents register where they've been communicated with. So not completely ticked off, but a decent effort towards it, and we'll improve on that in future responses. And then also from this event, no event is ever perfect, but this one was pretty good, but there are still some lessons learned that we can glean from it to make us better in the future. So some areas for improvement, I will say majority of these are already being worked on or steps put in place to move towards rectifying them. So the internet connectivity in the Justice and Emergency Services Precinct EOC could be better for Christchurch City Council responses. So there is a large suite of internet connectivity in there, but there is no council EOC in there. And so when council staff are bringing in their laptops and IT devices to assist in that response, we have to use essentially a public Wi-Fi server and then go through our VPN system with Citrix, which slows it down. It's not a war stopper, that's not the correct word, but doesn't end the response, but it does make it significantly delayed and a bit more challenging than it needs to be. So we're already putting steps in place to rectify that. Key response staff, short notice availability. So these are our key kind of technical SMEs like GIS, IT, stuff like that. They're very busy already. And so getting that specialist knowledge in quickly was hard, but then also some of our EOC function staffing, particularly I'll use the response manager as an example. We have some really good and capable response managers with a lot of depth. However, they're also really good at responding to fires. So Paul Devlin, Warren Hunt, just to name a couple, are our response managers as well, but obviously they were involved in the Port Hills response, either coordinating the air attack or being firefighters on the ground. So that shortened up our pool. Thankfully, we have the support of our neighbouring districts and TAs that came in and backfilled those gaps, but we can do better there internally. The specialist skills overview. So this one's probably sits across a lot of responses, but having a list of all kind of council staff qualifications, be it in Hybris, IT, GIS, a list that we can just pull upon. And if there's a particular response or problem that needs solving and there's a specialist skill that would help to solve that within council, we have a list already there that we could pull upon. So we don't have that yet, but again, we're moving towards receiving that. And then lastly, incoming response staff knowledge of CDM procedures. So I talked to it before saying how it was good. It is, but it could always be better. And because of some turnover in recent years, there are some people coming in that don't quite have that level of knowledge that may be required. Again, we're addressing that, but particularly external staff coming into our EOC, knowing our processes and the way that council does it. So again, we're working on that with induction packs and kind of a EOC quick reference guide for Christchurch City Council. That's the areas for improvement. We're now moving to areas for sustainment. So the stuff that was really good and we want to see continue into the future. So that commitment and adaptability of staff. The Christchurch City Council staff that came in were excellent. No challenge was too tough for them. They got stuck in regardless of their confidence levels. If they didn't know how to do something, they mucked in and figured it out. So that was really awesome, and want to see that again and just take another moment to praise that commitment of our staff. It's been talked to heaps already today, but again, that multi-agency collaboration was excellent, particularly in the PIM front. That is going to be sustained into the future, and that's one of the benefits of having all of those agencies at the Justice Precinct right next to each other is it facilitates that collaboration. And then lastly, the external surge staff. So shout outs to Waimakariri, Ashburton and the wider Canterbury region supporting us when we needed them and providing external surge staff in to backfill our areas. This needs to be a reciprocal thing, so when they are experiencing shortfalls, we will repay that favour and provide surge staff to them when they need it. But that was excellent. I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Keegan. I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to the recovery for a few minutes. So the recovery essentially exists from kicks off during the response period, and we like to think it ends when we morph, when we transition into dealing with some of the longer term issues through business as usual. We've put a copy of the recovery plan in everyone's seats. You can see it's a reasonably standard planning document, covers the recovery issue, what we're going to do, who's responsible, the time frame, and an ongoing record of progress and completion. Green is complete, amber is underway. We had two main stages. Firstly, the immediate recovery priorities. They were largely to identify the state of play, where we were, how were our affected people, what was the damage, identify any health and safety issues, and establish how we were going to proceed. Secondly, there are a number of medium-term issues. One of those was identifying people and offers of help. So we had lots of people calling in, lots of interested groups, affected residents. What we did is we've kept a register, so all the societies, groups, concerned members of the community, we have them logged down, and when there's an opportunity for them to contribute to the longer term recovery process, they will be available to do that. I guess a couple of key issues in the recovery. Firstly, there was the environmental damage to the Port Hills and the fire site. So immediately an environmental sector group was established to look after identifying some of the immediate risks. One of the main immediate risks was, and we'll talk to this a little later on, was a heavy rainstorm washing the contaminants from the fire site and sediment down through our drainage basins into our river systems. That was, apart from the effects on people, local residents and their safety, that was probably the major concern. So the environmental sector group, we engaged with council's park rangers and Three Waters to investigate and undertake a solution, which we'll cover in the next slide. We also identified an issue with the longer-term use of Worsley's and Kennedy's bush tracks. At the moment, they're open to potentially open to vehicle access. That was identified as a risk. So that's an area that, whilst it won't be closed out in this recovery process, it will be referred to the council's transport teams and the local community boards for consideration in the long term. The recovery will close out with a thorough report identifying all strands of the recovery, where they are, what's being included, and what is being referred onto further processes. Probably at this stage, it's been identified that the forum for discussing the wider ranging environmental impacts of the fire, and the ecological impacts as far as they concern the whole of the Port Hills, the appropriate forum for that's been identified as the upcoming Port Hills Plan. The parks planners aim to engage with firstly with the three local community boards, Waipuna, Waihoro and Banks Peninsula, to seek their views, their consideration on the scope before bringing the draft plan scope to council for further consideration. So that was considered the long-term forum to bring all those with an interest into a place where these issues could be discussed and thoroughly addressed. We have identified the potential for a separate work stream under that plan for the fire ground. And again, we can answer more questions on that at the end. Dave, I'd just like to pass back to you for...
Sure. As mentioned, recovery starts as soon as the fire starts, basically, for us. It's topical and it's mined in our incident management planning. So early on in this fire, I appointed Dean Harker, which is my community risk manager at FENS, to look after recovery options and community liaison. Community liaison was, as I said, quite high in our thinking. From our past experiences, we've found that it's really important to provide a single point of truth to people who are concerned about their welfare, their houses, their properties and their animals and livestock. They also, Dean worked pretty collaboratively with the Christchurch City Council and Selwyn District Council staff, iwi and the community. I think it was one of the success stories of this fire, and it's something we've been looking at in our post-incident debriefs recently, just held last week. Post the fire, FENS has been working on low flammability planting with council, fuel reduction advice to the community. And I'd just like to obviously shout out and the support we get from Paul Devlin, who is the Christchurch City Council head ranger for the Port Hills. Tremendous asset you've got there to work with, and he's also one of my air attack supervisors, so he's a very talented chap, so make sure you hang on to him. Finally, just like to acknowledge everyone who participated in this fire, which I think was a very good result with only the one structural loss. And I think it could have been a lot worse if the response hadn't been as good as it was. And I'd also like to congratulate our emergency services partners, our police, St John's and other services who assisted in that response. I think it was a really good community effort and a lot better than the fire in 2017. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So I'd just like to talk about a couple of specific elements of the recovery. As I said, an immediate priority was a damage assessment and identify some critical works. Out of that, Keegan's already explained that through Ngāti Wheki, we undertook a archaeological and geotechnical inspection of the site to make sure that we weren't affecting anything that we should have discovered beforehand, and that it was safe to resume use of the tracks. A number of agencies, council included, restored lifelines and infrastructure, cell phone repeaters, roads, a number of structures to the site. That happened very quickly. And again, Paul Devlin led a piece of work with local pastoral landowners to replace a number of bits of infrastructure, including a lot of fencing from a safety perspective, and in recognition that this was the second time in 6 years that their properties had been significantly damaged by fires of this nature. Perhaps our major bit of work on the recovery was managing the contaminants and sediment runoff. I'd just like to invite Tim Drennan from our Three Water Services to come up and have a quick update on that.
Thanks, John. Morning, everyone. So I think, in essence, the risk that we're trying to resolve is reducing sediment runoff from the Port Hills, from the fire ground, and also once it came off the hills, what are we going to do with it to protect our millions of dollars worth of assets, and therefore, reducing sediment runoff to the Heathcote. So there was 3 key areas. The Christchurch Adventure Parks, we worked quite closely with them and one of their key contractors to look at all the fire breaks and put cut-off drains and sediment control measures in the entirety of those breaks, which also included gravelling some of those key roads in that had been severely damaged. We'd also removed a whole lot of sediment and slash from Cashmere Stream, so that could be free-flowing again. Down at Cashmere Basin, so just below the Christchurch Adventure Park, there was already a sediment control first flush basin there, so an area that's super flat that allows water to come down off the hill, sit there, and then the sediment drops out. So we roughly doubled the size of that particular basin. We've grassed it all, and we're just about to start planting, so that's almost complete. And then in Tukuru, we did a very similar thing. By, well, not so much constructing new basins, but basically removing a whole lot of sediment that had already been collected, removing fish from a really manky old pond. There was hundreds of little fish in the area the size of this room, which was surprising, especially considering none of these streams are flowing at the moment. In total, we removed, where were we? About 470 cubic metres of sediment from Tukuru. So this particular photo here, the yellow outline is the low flow channel. So that's designed to basically drop out sediment. That red dot right at the very start, that's the largest sediment pond. So combination of the sediment removal along there was about 470 cube, which is not as a result of this fire, but as a result of those basins working, and that's sediment that hasn't got into the Heathcote and Cashmere Stream, so that's a big one for us. At Cashmere Basin, we removed about 70 to 80 cube of sediment as well. So they're all sitting there ready for some decent rain, streams to start flowing, and we'll see the result. So as of today, we haven't had those 2 valleys, the 2 streams, start flowing to see what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. The final thing that we thought would take the opportunity to try was some mussel shell buns. So up in Marlborough, there was some trials done of using crushed mussel to remove sediment from development areas. So we put 4 big buns in there. So we'll monitor those to see how effective they are once we get a bit of rain, decent bit of rain. That's it, John.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Last slide. Obviously, there'll be a full cost report in the closeout report from the recovery process, but costs to council to date are summarised in the slide. So the roading, repairs, traffic management, cordons, about 260,000. General civil defence, expensive safety advice, $35,000. Sediment runoff that Tim's just summarised, up to about 750,000. Fencing and miscellaneous works, primarily on the fire site, $75,000. And some of the people costs for our emergency operations centre response. It's about $30,000. The good thing for the council is that we expect almost all of these costs, probably all of them, to be absorbed within existing budgets. So there won't be a net cost to the council at the end. Which has been a fantastic effort from the units concerned. On a positive note, if you recall, the council allowed the Mayor's Welfare Fund to be activated, to receive donations to the victims and the volunteers. We currently have a balance of $4,236.65 in there, and it's our intention to bring a report to the council to recommend how that should be distributed in accordance with the donors' wishes. So this has been a lot of information so far. We've got the opportunity, with your permission, Phil, for a few questions. We've got a large cast, and just before we hand back to you, Mayor Phil, I'd also like to express my gratitude to everyone that's assisted the multi-agency team, to Dave and his fantastic team, the Christchurch City Council staff and volunteers. It was a well-rounded effort, and we're very pleased to be presenting it to you today. So over to you, Mayor Phil.
Yep, fair enough. Aaron, please.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of real quick ones. Firstly, on the fire, can we talk about that, and do we know? Because they don't normally start themselves.
Dave's probably for you.
No, they don't.
And there seems to be, coincidentally, a number of fires in rural areas this summer.
That's correct. We have a large number of fire causes. Recently, I've just removed the prohibited status for Canterbury, and I'd earlier gone to restricted for parts of Selwyn to allow fire management as a tool, which is the stubble burning from farming. There's been a variety of causes for those fires. Some of them have been escape burn-offs, some of them have been malicious, and some of them are yet to be determined. This fire is still under investigation. It's active by New Zealand Police, who are leading this. My fire investigation team are tasked with finding the point of origin and tracking the fire runs from on that point, obviously to give a description of the actual location where the fire was started and what ignited, and then identifying the hypothesis of how it started. So they are probably 3/4 of the way through that process, and are very much guided on where the New Zealand Police want to go with it from there. So it's about all I can say on that at this stage.
Then the next one is on the one lost property, which obviously you guys don't want to lose any. In the system, is that a registered house that you're told by us, hey look, you can see the house line, but we've got a couple of stray ones. Do you get that information?
Not really.
And
no.
did we even know it was there?
No, I didn't know it was there. I did an earlier reconnaissance in the afternoon once, just prior to getting situational awareness before I took over the fire from the incident commander who was in play before I arrived. That was get a viewpoint, discuss strategy and tactics of the fire, and where our pressure points were. Obviously the houses, life risk first.
Yep.
That house is a container house. It looks like a shed from the air. I directed resources to sit on the main properties that we identified. That's why we missed that one. My apologies to the owner of that property, but I'm not perfect. So,
it'd be interesting to know whether our system can identify any properties like that. So you're given a heads up to go, that's actually a dwelling of some sort, or someone lives there, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, do we, and this might be for you, John, do we count the carbon emissions of fires? Like, because that then, obviously, if we're going to carbon zero, has an impact, but it also can trigger more planting of the non-burnable matter, because we go, well, if we have a bushfire every second year, these are our emissions, so that our behaviour becomes that to counter that.
I can't answer your question. I'd need to go back and find out, and we'll get back to you.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thank you. Kelly?
Thanks very much, gentlemen. It gives me great confidence. It seems like an amazing response, you know, and sort of seeing it up close like this is really, really interesting. And obviously, it's very comprehensive. Sadly, you guys are getting really good at this. Yeah, my question is, now that we've had a couple of fires, you must be seeing things that we can do to be the fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance. There must be aspects of the plantings, etc., that could be improved to avoid that. Obviously, things like fire breaks, and there'd be issues with those. But yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing how we avoid this happening again in a few years, and what we're doing, putting in place to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll introduce Dean Harker, who's been working on that with my team, and then council may have a response as well on that. Dean?
Morning, everyone. Yeah, prior to the fire, we'd done quite a lot of work with the community boards in the area, and a lot of that stuff is around defendable zones and people's properties, and that looks at not only planting, low flammable planting. So we did a project on that in conjunction with Lincoln University a few years ago, and we looked at what plants can actually low flammable. So what they do is they actually slow the fire down, so it gives us buying us time. So we've done a lot of work in that area around planting, and as I say, those defendable zones. So having getting rid of dead material around those properties. We've been working with some of the landowners and with Paul Devlin's help as well on some of the bare land and some of the grazing land to make sure that we're reducing the fuel loads in there. And getting people to just think about how they can protect their own properties as well. We've got a couple of success stories that have come out from the 2017 fire, where some of the homeowners up there put in their own sort of sprinkling systems around the outside of their properties, did some planting, and we're pushing that out into our media and that as well. One of the nurseries up there at the moment in the Hoonhay Valley, they were two of the people that were major landowners in this fire that were affected, and that nursery now is venturing into low flammable planting. And we're doing some projects up there as well, showing people how they can actually make their properties safer. So access for fire trucks. So we do a lot of stuff around how much room's needed for a fire truck to get into those properties, what water sources that we've got in the area, who's got capacity to have tanks, what sort of outlets are on those tanks so the fire service can actually hook into their tanks. So we're sort of getting people to take a little bit of responsibility in their own properties of what they can do to actually stop it, and to be aware of when they're working, especially when we're in the dry seasons coming into summer, when we're moving into our restricted and prohibited times, is limiting the access of what they're doing that can actually cause an ignition. So, you know, any sort of hot works around any of that dry stuff, as they don't do it. We have our hot fire days at the moment, where we put a lot of messaging out to the public and other businesses about what times of the day they should actually be doing any sort of hot works, or what days they shouldn't. So, you know, like if they're going to be looking at mowing or grass, cutting their lawns, or using a chainsaw, certain times of the day they shouldn't be doing that. And having probably some services around or equipment around that if a fire does start, that they can put it out quickly. So if they are actually doing any work, that they do have a method of actually putting that fire out. So a lot of readiness type work we're really pushing at the moment to make people prepared, and we're doing that in conjunction with the councils and that as well. We're looking at doing some planting projects on the Port Hills themselves. That's with local iwi as well. So yeah, that's sort of what we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, thanks. That's really encouraging to hear.
Councillor Barber, the Port Hills plan provides a ideal forum for some of those environmental and ecological questions to be answered. And that's really the longer term approach that we've alluded to.
Thank you. Victoria, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that we're on time.
Are we?
Yeah.
A
So,
notable
I've
first.
I've got a couple of questions. My first
No, no,
one's-
go for your life. This is important.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Methil. My first one's for you, John. I note that there's a closeout report that's going to be coming, and you may not be able to answer this, but I appreciate for an early heads up if we can have it. Mentioned that there were some areas for improvement, and particularly mentioned that there was some more training required for council staff in relation to EM procedures. What does that look like, and have we got sufficient resources and budget to do that?
So there's two parts to what does that look like. There's what we can do internally at council, and then there's the external stuff that we need additional support with. So internally, we're ramping up the frequency of our EOC foundation course, which is just an introduction into the EOC and emergency management operations. It's kind of the bare minimum standard you need to be able to respond to an event. Then there is additional works in collaboration with ourselves and the wider Canterbury CDM group about the different EOC course advancements. And so currently, once you do the EOC foundation course, which is internally facilitated, you can either do, you could do any one of the function-specific courses, which is called an EOC 3 course, and that's externally facilitated by Emergency Management Training Centre, MTech, where you can go off and learn specifics about that. But that's aimed at the function manager sort of level, so a leadership level within the EOC. The key step that we're missing is that in between, the EOC 2 course. But there is a work stream in development, or currently working towards figuring out what that EOC 2 course looks like between all of the Canterbury TAs and the Canterbury CDM group to bring that online pretty quickly. And then we're really pushing for council staff to use online e-learning to further their knowledge of emergency management. So there is a NEMA run website called Takatu, which has a bunch of e-learning, as well as advocating for the reading of CDM wider material, such as the Act and the National Plan and stuff like that.
Councillor Henstock, we have done an end of May 2024 budget forecasting exercise, and we anticipate we'll have the budget to carry out any necessary training.
It's really helpful, thank you. Sorry, I've got one supplementary to that. In relation to costs, John, appreciate your cost report's going to be coming. I understand that there were funds collected by the Christchurch Foundation. Can we just make sure that we're incorporating that into your cost report? I'd like to see that money's understand how and where that fits in.
Yes.
My last question then is in relation to comms, and I'm really delighted to hear that we had excellent communication, so congratulations to everyone that's been involved in that. I'm keen to understand how the public behaved, and not so much those who were immediately impacted by the fire, but the rubberneckers. I haven't heard anything about that. How did the public behave? Is there any further work in relation to public education or any lessons learned in that respect? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, people were curious. It's a spectacle. It's very visual fire, particularly in the Port Hills. So it's understandable that people would pay great interest in it. Early on in the messaging from ourselves and New Zealand Police was encouraging people to stay away and allow us to do our job. A lot of heavy machinery, a lot of dangerous assets that can. So the last thing we wanted is to injure any spectators. So I think people got that message in the end, and I did notice a drop-off in spectators, particularly on day 2. So I guess that messaging worked mainly through the media and council as well. So yeah, it is a problem at all incidents we go to. It's a visual attraction, whether it be a fire or whether it be a wildfire or a structure fire. They're particularly visual. They do attract people, and it's crowd management's part of our thinking and part of our planning. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's a really great report, comprehensive. I'm just sitting here a little bit nervous about what's happening outside with the rain, and mindful that we're keeping some of you maybe from looking at that. But there's like what I'm taken by is just the improvement from the previous fire, but also I guess the stuff that you're talking about in terms of being prepared, looking at risk mitigation, and I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can apply the lessons and the response that you've done for this to other things like flooding? Like right today, I'm getting really anxious with people in my community who don't have a register for flooding hotspots, for example, don't get direct text messages, maybe aren't getting messages around what to do to prepare for heavy rainfall or adverse weather. So is there a way that we can take the learnings from this, which is excellent, and sort of start applying them to some of the other types of issues that we get when it comes to natural disasters or, adverse weather events, or even, I guess the irony with the wastewater treatment plant fire, where we're told there's no money and we have to bring in special reports months later to get planning done. But now I'm hearing that all the planning here is funded through operational budgets and we don't have a budget issue.
Well, I can talk to some of the first part of that question, not the sewage plant one, but I guess technology, as I've mentioned in our slides, that helps. That's part of our risk reduction focus. It gives us that intelligence. If you've got good intelligence and good situational awareness, you can put a good response in. And it's all about that pre-thinking and pre-planning to the risk. So I think that's really good. As you've heard, there's significant training going on with council staff in the EOC operation. In fact, there was a real whenua exercise yesterday as an example for AF8 yesterday, which was a joint agency and joint council workshop that's going on throughout. So they are really good examples of pre-thinking and pre-planning for the risk. As an emergency services manager, you can't understate that enough. It's about being prepared and understanding what is going to happen, and then exercising it so that you're ready for the event when it happens. Because when the event happens, people react differently under the pressure, and there's always those side injects you get that you haven't planned for. And if you've done that pre-planning, those side injects can be managed better.
Yeah. So the communities that I represent are not so worried about fire. Sure. Worried about flooding, worried about tsunamis.
Yeah, we're talking about a Port Hills fire recovery thingy. Just try and keep it on.
Okay. Well, then can I ask around the environmental stuff? Because it was good to get the kind of feedback around the interventions that were made at the time. How are we measuring the environmental impact downstream of the areas where we did put in, the sediment controls? How are we measuring what's happening a lot further up the river? In terms of, we've heard what we've saved from going in, but I was quite interested to know how we're measuring and monitoring what the actual environmental impact of the fire has been.
Yeah, I can't talk too much to that at the moment because effectively we haven't been able to sample or look at any sediment runoff because there's been none yet because of the weather. But as soon as we do get a bit of rainfall, we'll be monitoring that, taking samples to understand the effectiveness of the measures that we put in place.
So before we put the measures in place, did we have a good understanding of what was going into the waterways, or did we just get it so quick that there wasn't really a chance?
Look, I can't answer that now. I'd have to go away and find out.
From a recovery perspective, this was an immediate risk which we needed to attend to. So Council's Three Waters team, in consultation with ECAN, Ngāti Whaki and others, took steps to mitigate that risk before risking a heavy rain event and stuff washing down. So they moved quickly and well.
Thanks, John.
Last one, please, Yanni. On the training, just very quickly, wondered if elected members could be given the opportunity to do that stage 1 training and then do we haven't really heard much about the role of elected members in the response, so appreciate maybe not get an answer today, but just thought it'd be quite interesting. In previous events we have done some sort of assessment around what's the role of elected members, and that would be quite useful to know how we can upskill work with elected members. But I just want to come back to the budget. Is there going to be a report around the Port Hills plan, around the cost associated to doing it and how much it's going to cost?
I can answer your first question around elected members training, potentially the EOC.
We'll probably want to come back to you on the elected members training and budgets, because there is some guidance on elected member role in civil defence and emergencies, and we'll refresh that and come out with a comprehensive answer. Just a little bit conscious of time.
Thank you, John. We are very conscious of time. Thank you. We've got a few more questions.
The budget?
The budget for Port Hills plan, I'd have to refer that to the planner and the head of parks, and we can get back to you on that.
Thank you. Sarah, please. Lastly, Sarah.
Thanks so much. Two quick ones. Firstly, just on the recovery plan itself, John, you mentioned initially that this was kind of the recovery plan, but then you mentioned that there was actually a larger document coming. So it's similar to the 2017 one, probably not quite as long as the 71 pages, but the actual recovery plan, not the closeout report.
The document coming will be the closeout report. This is a smaller recovery plan related to a smaller scale incident. So the document coming further will be the closeout report, pulling everything together and mapping the way forward.
Okay, thanks. And the last one is just actually on the on Attentis, the early detection technology. I know we discussed this at the time of the fires. We did have several already in place sort of at CAP. And you mentioned we've got some more in place now, and are we planning on doing that throughout the Port Hills?
What I can say now, in the noting times of the essence, is we have 5 in place. We've committed to a further 3 immediately, and they're on probably a task for the Port Hills plan process to identify any more.
Okay, so I'll just express a small amount of concern there, in that I think that I wouldn't want to wait for a Port Hills plan to be done before we were putting things in place, when it's probably a technical decision on where they're best used from Smart Cities and FENS, I would think.
Hi, just a quick update. As John says, we've got funding for 3 more. At the moment, we're planning on the top of Worsley's side of the Kiwi and Bridle Path, and that's based on advice from FENS. So we're looking to get those installed in the next 2 to 3 months. So they'll be active pretty quickly, and we've got a temporary unit we can use tactically as well to put in high-risk areas in the meantime as well.
And are FENS keen for us to have more than just those 3 new ones?
Ultimately, yes. We're building a business case to go to central government, ideally, and see if there's any other funding sources to help, set up that network and continue to fund it longer term.
Yeah. So could we please get some information actually for the long-term plan on maybe how much that might be if we chose to do it, rather than relying on others and external funding sometimes too, just how much it would cost. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Right, I'll finish up. Thank you, John, Dave and team. That was a very, very good and detailed report. Once again, we hold a massive debt of gratitude to everyone that was involved, especially volunteers. We have, and we did learn from the last fire. Our control centre, which is the envy of the rest of the country, certainly impressed Minister Mitchell and the PM. We're very lucky to have it. The main thing with a state of emergency is to let the personnel who know what to do, give them the licence to get out and do what they do best, and let us get out of the way and you do your job. The control centre and civil defence team worked extremely well. I was very proud to go around there and see how it worked. I haven't been given a white jacket, and neither I should, but it works extremely well, and we're very lucky to have them, so thank you very much. But lastly, the last time we didn't have Hoon Hay, Cashmere and the Adventure Park retention and sediment ponds finished. This time we have, even though there's a tiny bit to do on the Adventure Park one. So going forward, when we get rain, which will happen in the next couple of months, I think we're a damn sight more prepared than we were last time. And with, as what Tim said, we're digging out hundreds of cubic metres of silt or sediment out of the retention ponds. That's what they're there for, is because it stops the going into the river and then into the estuary. So I think you're never prepared for a disaster, because it could be happening half an hour ago and we don't know. But we're a lot better prepared than we were last time. So thank you very much for everyone for what you do. Very well done.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. So we're all good. So we will come back at 11 o'clock. We'll have a cup of tea and come back at 11 o'clock.